Welcome to this webinar today to get maths ready for 2022, making connections between school and home. Pretty important topic, has been for the last year or two, might continue to be for a while. It's always important. So welcome to people from all around Australia and New Zealand here today. I'm Jacky. To give you a bit of my history, you can probably already tell I was a school teacher. So a school teacher for 28 years in primary schools in New South Wales. I escaped the classroom about 6 years ago and joined the amazing world of digital mathematics at Matific. About 6 years ago, I've been to hundreds of schools all around Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, all over the place. Mostly by Zoom in the last year or two, though. But some of you, I might have even visited your school, so hello again to you. Anyway, I know how you're feeling at this time of year. I have not forgotten that, not in my stomach, as the school year was about to start. So hopefully, we're going to cover a lot of things today, but hopefully it might alleviate some things for you and get you mentally ready for what lies ahead. I do want to make this an interactive session. So there's a couple of live polls along the way. And as I said, please, any questions or comments or advice you've got for others, please put it in the chat box and make sure you select everyone to share your comments. All right, we've got a lot to cover in 45 minutes. So basically what we're looking at today is the new school year. What are the greatest challenges? Getting to know your students, it's so important, and the importance of positivity in mathematics. I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth about why that's just so important. The digital versus hands-on debate. Noise is going in the background. I'll try and get rid of that. Homework, yes or no? We're going to do a bit of a live poll about that too. And of course, some practical ideas for you about digital maths, making those connections between school and home. Lots to get through. Let's make a start. As I said, any questions along the way, please just make sure you pop them in the chat box. All right, we're going to do a little bit of a live poll. As I said, the start of the new year is probably causing a lot of anxiety. So I'm going to do this live poll, and I want you to think about, I'm launching the poll now. What do you find the most daunting at the start of the new school year? What's troubling you the most now? I actually put all of the things that trouble me at the start of the new school year, but there's also an extra one in there that I never used to have to face. Is it setting up the classroom? Is it writing the new programs, the uncertainty around COVID, or just that overwhelming mountain of work that you've got ahead of you and you know you're going to get exhausted with all of that? So pick one. I know that they're probably all relevant, but pick one that's troubling you the most. What's the most on your mind? I'll give you a few more seconds to try and get through that, have a good think about it, and then we will share the results of that poll. It's interesting seeing the results as they're coming through live because we're getting quite a variety of responses. I thought there'd be one in particular. I'll tell you in a minute which one I thought. I don't want to influence you, which one I thought would be the most common. But anyway, 3 seconds, 3, 2, 1, and I'm going to end that poll and I'm going to share the results. I'm hoping, can you all see that on the screen? Let me know in the chat box if you can't see it. But it looks like the one that was the most commonly responded, mind you, they all had responses, was the workload. Just that general feeling of exhaustion. It does feel quite daunting, doesn't it, to know you've got a very long list of things you need to get through to get started. I thought the uncertainty around COVID might have been the most popular one, but perhaps if I'd done that a week ago, but now I think there's a little bit more information coming out. It always helps if you've got more facts and information, and that's hopefully alleviating a lot of your anxiety. So thank you for sharing that. That's really interesting to hear from you in that regard. All right, let's move along. I want to talk about getting to know your students. Now, they say first impressions are important, and they are, particularly with students. You need to, well, not necessarily get them to like you, but you want them to be happy, excited about school in those first few days. Because if you don't have them in the first few days, it's going to be hard to win them over later. So I don't want to add to your pressures there, but we all know that it's true. First impressions are important. We want them skipping out of the playground, out into their mum and dad's car at the end of the day, excited that they've had a great day on day one. Now, one thing that is obviously not a possibility on day one, but as you move along, It's important to provide, if you can and when you can, learn about your students and what are their key interests. And when you can, actually provide opportunities in their learning that revolve around that. So for example, and I'm always thinking about mathematics, so I'm going to think about that. In word problems, if you know that your students absolutely love, when the Winter Olympics start, or they're into soccer, or there might be a Pokemon craze, or whatever it is that's a common interest with your students, try and create some word problems around that in mathematics, for example. Or when you're designing project work, try and think of things that might actually genuinely interest the students, because studies have shown that if you give them the opportunity to explore areas they're interested in, they're much more likely to engage in that learning process. Now, I know it's not always possible to do that, but the reason I bring this up is about, as I said, first impressions. It's really important to get to know your students very early on, very early in the piece, and make them feel a bit special. That little one-on-one comment you can make with them every now and then, how was your soccer game on the weekend? Did your mum have the baby yet? Whatever you can think of. If you've got that little connection every now and then with your individual students, make them feel a bit special. It makes a big, big difference. Now, I'm sure you're all aware of Professor John Hattie and his work. He particularly looks at the relationship and the impact of teachers and their students. And he came up with several top qualities that he found to be important, but I'm just sharing the top 4 with you. The top 4 qualities for teacher success. Number 1, that teachers are passionate about helping their students learn. If you're on this webinar in your school holidays, I know you're passionate. So you're already ticking the box for number 1 in my book. But notice it says about their students learning. So it's not just about passionate about your students generally, but it's actually about their learning. And the way that you monitor your impact on their learning and adjust appropriately. You all know, probably halfway through a lesson, if not sooner, whether the lesson's going well. Is it resonating with your students? So when you're, assessing student results, don't just look at marks on a page. Actually analyze your lessons every now and then and think, what works with my students? And you might find that the style that you used last year doesn't necessarily work with your group this year. So those teachers who adjust their approach really do make for great teachers. You need to also be clear about what it is you want the students to learn. I know a lot of teachers get sort of swept away and bogged down in the practicalities about getting the cardboard ready and cutting out the paper and all the practical stuff. But please remember to think about, what are you trying to achieve? What learning outcome are you trying to achieve? What's your goal in that lesson? And it's really important to be clear about that. So don't let all the other glitzy things get in the way. And that's true for the students to focus in again, remind them, this is what we're trying to learn today. And I've put in bold number 4 because that's what we've been talking about. Forging strong relationships with your students, really, really key. Right at the get-go, right on day 1, to do the best you can to try and get to know your students really well. A little activity I used to like to do on day 1, we'd all cut out their silhouettes and students could write words or put pictures on their silhouette, make it quite large, as a getting to know you, and they can be hung around the room. Now, obviously with younger students, it's hard, but you can pre-cut out lots of pictures. It might be different foods or sports or whatever activities, and they can be picking their favorite things to show what makes them special. Obviously, older students, you can go even further. They could be printing off, logos of their favorite sports team or whatever, and cutting them out and pasting them on, get them from the internet, whatever. And another little additional activity that can be fun when they're all finished, you can play a guessing game, hold them up, have the name covered up and say, who do you think this is? And see how well the children know each other. Particularly if you're in a large school where there might be, 3 or 4 classes on every year level, the children may not have been in the same class with some of those students. Maybe there might be new students and they don't all know each other. So this is just a nice getting to know each other, as well as the teacher getting to know you. And that's going to help you design those lessons that, really appeal. Just a reminder, we've got the chat box happening. So if you've got any comments around anything I've said, or you might have some suggestions, please don't hesitate to add them in the chat box. All right, I've got another poll for you. How do your students react when you say this? I'd react quite nicely if my teacher had looked like that. I shouldn't say that, should I? Let's do maths. Now, obviously, you don't know this year's group of students yet, but think about last year's or previous groups of students. When you say to them, it's time for maths now, let's do maths, how do they react? All right, we're going to do a quick poll because I want to know, are they happy when you say it's time for maths, or are they a little bit sad and anxious? So I'm going to get this poll happening. Let's go to the next poll here about maths, happiness. Here we go. Give me your honest view. Would you say, generally, think about your class last year maybe, would you say most of them liked it? Most of them didn't like it? Well, it was a bit 50-50. Give you a few seconds to let's see what the most popular response is. There's a reason why I'm asking this question, of course. So it'll be interesting to see what you come up with. Just give you a few more seconds to complete that. All right, 5 seconds. Have a think. Did most of your kids like it? Did most not like it? Was it about half-half? 3, 2, 1. I'm going to end the poll and I'm going to share those results. I hope you can see that. I can see somebody saying, Rosemary's saying it depends on the time of the year. Okay. The start mixed, by the end happy. You must be a great maths teacher, Rosemary. Awesome. And someone else is saying 50-50. But looking at the poll results, we've got about 42% that say they most liked it, 13% said most didn't, and about 46% half-half. I don't like to be negative. I'm not normally a negative person, but I'm going to focus on that 42% that said like it. That's fantastic. But we've got a whole bunch, more than half your class didn't like it necessarily. They may have some, well, we've got 50-50, so we've got a few in there that maybe did. Maybe they liked some lessons and not others. Already 13% that said no, they don't. Now, the reason that I wanted to bring this up is because there was a study about a year ago, I think it was, across Australian Year 4 students, and already 1 in 4 identified the fact that they don't like maths. So Year 4 in Australia is the equivalent to Year 5 in New Zealand. So we're talking 10-year-olds pretty much. We've already lost 25% of them. Now, what are the chances that those children are going to suddenly like it when they get older? If you've lost them already by the time they're in Year 4, they're gone. They're not going to go on and do higher level mathematics, are they? They're not going to suddenly love maths when they're older. So once again, I don't mean to add to your pressures, but fostering a love of mathematics in young students is crucial because we all know how important STEM is, and so many of our students are going to want to work in STEM careers when they get older, and if they don't have the maths, they won't be able to do the technology and the science and the engineering. They need the maths. Now, here's my theory as to why. Why do students not love maths? If you've joined me for a webinar in the past, you might have seen a little bit of this before, but bear with me because it's important that we have a think about it. It's boring. That's what a lot of children will give you as an answer. Why don't they love it? It's boring. Now, my theory as to why they say that, I think a lot of teachers are still using a lot of worksheets and textbooks. It's a lot of numbers on the page. I am not saying you can never use textbooks or worksheets. I'm not saying that. But if we rely on it too much, it can get very tedious, very black and white, very boring. And here's another reason, and I've got to admit, I was very guilty of this. A lot of teacher talk. We're very time poor teachers. You know, there's a curriculum is thick. There's a lot to get through. And sometimes we think, well, the fastest way to teach is just show them. Let's just show them the method and they'll know how to do it. And that might work for some children. But will they retain it if all they've done is been shown? We all know children learn by doing. And if we just are out the front explaining, no, they need to be doing. But as I said, I was guilty of that sometimes myself, but it's just something that's worth thinking of. Another reason that students might not love maths is I don't understand it. It can get difficult, especially when concepts become more abstract as they get older. They need to have that conceptual understanding when they're young. And you've probably got a classroom, or you're about to have a classroom of a range of types of learners. Some are visual, some are auditory learners, some are hands-on learners, and you've got to try to cater for all of them, and they could all be working at different levels. It's a challenge, I know. I don't mean to depress you, but obviously if something is, look, the best advice, I guess the best advice I can give you is to teach in a variety of ways and use a variety of resources. You've all seen where you've tried to teach a concept and the kids didn't get it, but then you did it a different way and the light bulb moment happened. So you've just got to try to mix it up a bit. A variety is the key, I believe. Lastly, with mathematics, there's anxiety out there around maths. I'm scared of making mistakes. Why are children so anxious about maths? Because it's often tested. We're doing so much testing and not enough teaching and learning. That's my thought. And people often see maths as a black and white subject. You're either right or you're wrong. No. Think about high school maths, where with these long, complex problems, and you were rewarded along the way for showing your thinking and showing your working out. And you might not have got the answer in the end, but you still got some marks. Do we do that in primary school? I don't think we do it enough. And honestly, there's a lot of parent pressure too, because they worry about the score. What did you get in your test? What was your score today? I think we need to worry about the amount of testing and type of testing. We should be doing so much more formative assessment rather than these summative tests with the score. These are my views. Tell me in the chat box whether you agree. I can see some people are saying in special education, we seem to teach to the strengths of the students. Okay, yeah, I know. Where sometimes there are 2 or 3 learning outcomes happening, and we need to find those roadblocks. Thanks, Peter, and thank you, Letty, for joining in there. That's great. All right, does digital help in terms of children liking maths? Now, the short answer is yes, because we know kids like using technology. They always think it's fun. But not always. Not if it looks like this. Because even in 2022, if you're using digital maths, take a look on the screen. What do the student activities look like? Because even today, with all the technology we have, a lot of schools are still using it looks like a worksheet on a screen. It's not really doing much more for the student than if they were back using a textbook. It marks it for the teacher, so that's helpful. But in terms of what the students are doing, it's not very inspiring. So whenever I'm talking to people about digital resources and digital maths, I always say, don't just look at what the teacher's using, look at what the students are doing. You need to look at the student activities, and then they will hopefully be a bit more inspired to do mathematics. In fact, going to this digital versus hands-on debate. Now, this was all the rage, particularly in the last year or so. During COVID, should we be doing digital? Should we be doing hands-on? They used digital so much at home during lockdown, so schools felt like they had to swing the pendulum the other way and go back to using hands-on. But I'm always saying, why not both? I think too often digital maths is thought of in isolation, that people are using it just for homework, or just that 1 week where they go to the 1 day a week where they go to the computer lab. But you should be making connections. If you've got a really good digital maths resource, you should be making connections between what they're doing on the screen and your hands-on work and your written work and your class discussion. It's all about making those connections. All right, moving right along. In fact, back on that point, if you think about all of the types of lessons you do in maths, hands-on, discussions, assessments, your homework, your written tasks, your problem solving, your digital resource should be connected to all of those. Obviously not in every single lesson, but you can make that connection. So if you learn anything out of today, I want to urge you to think about how you can not just use your digital maths, but use it well. And I'm going to really focus on this purple section here, problem solving. The reason why I'm highlighting problem solving is because that's the thing that takes a teacher a lot of time. And I want to save you time. So finding and creating those rich tasks, those rich mathematical thinking, problem solving tasks, it's hard to find them. They can be expensive and they can be time consuming. I want to save you that. Look at digital. That's where digital can help. All right, you can actually get some really good mathematical. If you've got the right resources, you can get some good problem solving there. And of course, you can link it to homework. I'm going to show you soon how you can design some practical hands-on lessons and connect it to your digital. All right, now I'm going to do a poll with you again in a moment. This time, it's about homework. Think primary school. What are your views on homework? All right, get ready to do the last poll of the day. I'm going to get that ready. Oh, I've been sharing that result with you, sorry. Get rid of that. All right, so let's do the homework poll. I'm launching it now. Do you think homework is helpful in primary school? It's a simple yes or no. I didn't give you a third option. Do you think homework is helpful in primary school? Yes or no? Shouldn't have a bit of a think. Shouldn't take you too long. I'm sure there are lots of people out there that wish there was some kind of third option in there. We'll talk about that in a moment. I'll give you a few more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to end the poll now. And what are you thinking the result is? All right, here we go. I'm going to share the result here. Oh, pretty close to 50-50. Just a little bit more than 50 said yes. 50% of you said yes, and a little bit less than 50% said no. All right, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. If I had have said as a third option, what if it had have been just from year 3 up? Would that have been different? Would you have thought, well, okay, homework's all right when they're a little bit older, but not when they're very young? Or what if I can see that Roseanne's just sent something very sensible, just about homework reading? You know, just make reading the focus of homework. Would that have helped? So I know it was a very broad general question, but I wanted to get a feeling for where you're at. Now, the thing with homework is there are lots of pros and cons, but here are the main ones that have been identified. One of the main pros is it's a great opportunity to consolidate classroom learning and just reinforce those concepts. The con is it doesn't always work. It's not always effective. And going back to John Hattie here, just quoting him, his studies around homework in primary school, he found there was 0 impact, but the reason for that, he found that a lot of teachers were doing separate and unrelated projects rather than just reinforcing learnt knowledge. So things like making a big solar system thing, or these grand projects, which, let's face it, the parents did most of the work. This was not helpful. It wasn't helping in student learning outcomes. I'm sure you guys, you teachers out there, are getting a lot better at this. But really, homework is just about as like reading skills or building up those skills and reinforcing what has been taught in class. And thank you, Jenny's come up with a great idea. It can be helpful if students have a choice of activities. Thank you, Jenny, because that comes back to what we were talking about before about student interests. If a student feels they have a choice and they can pick the one that interests them the most, that can be a really powerful thing to do. And Emma's saying needs to be independent, relevant, and consolidate, not giving new learning. And that must have been a big challenge during remote learning as well, because you couldn't just do revision. It was about teaching new concepts. So John Hattie says homework only becomes effective when students are assigned learning tasks that ask them to revise taught information. Alrighty, moving right along. Now, I'm going to show you some videos here. I'll just pause that for a moment. So we're talking about digital and doing some practical ideas and activities that link and connect your digital with hands-on. Now, these videos I'm going to show you obviously are from Matific. There are just 2 or 3 different activities to show you. So we'll watch, there's a little video. Obviously, normally the student is doing it live and they're moving the objects around, but this is a little video. This one's for the young ones. It's about ordinal numbers. But what I'm going to show you is some practical ideas that you could use whether they're in class or whether they're working remotely, however, whatever it looks like, you could use it. So just have a look at this little video. So you've got a lineup of students about to do their class photo, funny looking students we've got there. And it says, hand the scarf to the 3rd student in line. So we can go 1st, 2nd, 3rd, You can see it's about ordinals. There we go. It's beautiful graphics, lots of fun. Now it says, hand the belt to the 8th student in line. By the way, it does read the question aloud if you need that, if the student, so, because should be about maths. This is another thing about problem solving in maths. We shouldn't be about comprehension skills. All right, we found the belt goes on. I think it's a cow down there. The 8th one in line. You get the idea. Hand the glasses to the 2nd student in line. So this is great to teach them the language of maths as well. Now, my thought with digital and hands-on and written work and linking them, and this is just a personal preference here, I like to do the digital first because it's fun. They get to play around. It's very non-threatening. And then you will see how much better they cope with their written work if they've already had play around with this, with the digital first. But here's some suggestions. So as I said, you could do this in class or you could do it at home. If it was a home one, you could say, get the students to get their family members to stand in order of height and record their results. So they could make little signs saying 1st, 2nd, 3rd, however many people there are in their family, and put those numbers in front. They could even wear them as a sign around their neck. You could do that obviously in class with your own students if it's something that you'd like to do in class rather than for homework. You could do it with their feet. You've done it with the heights. I wonder if it's the same with their feet. So everyone, take your right shoe off and you all put your feet next to each other. 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th. And it's great to take photos and videos if they're doing this at home. And that's a nice little way to assess how they're going. You can also, if they were working from home, find 10 objects around the home, or it could be in the class if you're doing this in class. Place them on the floor in order and label them 1st to 10th. If they're at home, they could take a photo and send it to you. So I'm hoping you get the idea. And, actually on Matific, there are lesson plans that go along with these. So you don't always have to think of the ideas yourself. There are some suggestions on there too, but you're probably even more creative. So you can think of some fun ideas to go along with it. Let's take a look at another one. This one is about area. So we've got our little echidna there. How many squares are needed to cover this rectangle? I'm just going to pause that for a moment. The thing with area is, and we talked before about teacher talk and showing the method and explaining how to get the answer. It's very easy to fall into that trap with area. You can just explain it's length times width or length times breadth. You'll get your answer. But that's not really giving them the opportunity to get that depth of understanding, that conceptual understanding. It'll get them the answer, but we want students to have that depth of understanding so they can move on when it gets more abstract. So this is a great activity to actually show not just why, not just the how, not just length times breadth, but why. Why does that work? And because they can actually see and manipulate those squares, they can see now 3 across and 3 down. And when you multiply it, it fills up that square. So it's actually teaching them that understanding of why that works. Okay, so that's an area activity. And you can see as the shape gets bigger, you can even extract that even further and use that formula. Now, think about how you could do this in the classroom or at home. Let them cut out their own squares. All right, so I said 10 centimetres by 10 centimetres. It's up to you how big the squares you want, but I think that works quite well. Estimate how many squares it will take to cover your desk or table. Now, I love estimation. I think estimation is a fantastic skill because if you look at a child's estimate, you've got a really good idea of whether they understand that concept. If their estimate is way out, if I say estimate how many squares are going to, cover that table, and they say 5,000, they've got no idea. All right, so I always think it's a good idea to let them estimate first, then they measure and record their answer, and then they should be comparing. Does your answer look close to your estimate? Was it close? So I always think that's a good way to go. And then obviously they do the measuring. What is the perimeter? What is the area? And look at that relationship between perimeter and area as well. It doesn't have to be a desk or table. They could be doing it larger scale. You could cut out bigger squares and do the whole room, or smaller squares and, estimate on a smaller scale. All right, here's a fun one with beading. Now watch this. Make a necklace so that exactly a quarter of the beads are round. And you know what I love about this? So this is obviously another Matific activity, and I've used Matific in the classroom. So one thing I loved about it, it gave me new and innovative ways to teach. One of those things on that diagram I showed you before was discussions. This is a great way to start a discussion. If you've got an interactive whiteboard or just a screen, just a TV in your classroom, put it up on the screen, and it's a great way to start the discussion, because I would ask this child, let's have a look at this necklace that they made. It's supposed to be a quarter of the beads are round. So I would ask them, why did you put 4 beads on the string? And hopefully their answer might be because the denominator is a 4. Why did you make one of them round? Because the numerator says 1. Does it have to be 4 beads? Is there another amount of beads I could put on there? What if I put 12 beads on there? Then how many have to be round? So then you get into factors and multiples, and it's just a great way to open up that discussion. And I talk about, we studied a lot, did a lot of research on visible thinking at my school. This is a great way to get in their heads. If you can observe a student do even just one question, you can learn a lot about that student. Make a note of how they went. That discussion, you can see whether they've grasped this topic or whether they haven't. Anyway, moving right along. So this child got that correct. So that's great. They get all the stars and what have you. The nice thing too on Matific, if they get it wrong, they don't get that big red cross. You know, before we were talking about maths is too black and white. Not on Matific. So they do get some scaffolding and guidance. They get to try again if they make a mistake, and they get help if they need it, which parents love, because sometimes parents don't know the best way to teach. And so this way they're independent. The students are being guided as they go. Now here's some practical ideas. Basically what I'm suggesting is get a piece of string. Students could make their own beads. They could cut strips of paper, colour them, and you can tell them how many colours they need. Bit of sticky tape and glue. I tried to pick really basic equipment that kids would have at home. So if they are learning from home, or if you want to do this for homework, that they could make them easily. You can also use coloured pasta. You know, pasta comes in different colours and everything, so that works too. Look, they basically make those, and you design some questions around that. So it could be, make a necklace where half the beads are striped, and there has to be at least 4 beads. This is where you can get creative with your questioning. Make a necklace where 3/4 of the beads are the same colour. If they're working from home, or if it's for homework, take photos. Look, here's one of mine. Didn't I do a beautiful job? You can easily, you talked about before formative versus summative assessment. This is a great little formative assessment task, and it's not going to stress the children out. Make a necklace and write a sentence to explain the fraction. And you can imagine this works with a variety of year levels, because you can tailor it to make it very simple for the early years and more complex as they get older. And by taking the photo, look, I can see that they've got it. I know a lot of teachers worry about that maybe the parents help them if they're doing it from home. You could do it in class or at home. Anyway, that's my favourite necklace. Now I wear it all the time, maybe not today. All right, moving along. So the other thing I wanted to show you, hello, if you're kia ora, I should say, if you are over the Tasman in New Zealand, please say kia ora in the chat box. If you're from New Zealand, I know we have a few there. You can actually get Matific in, have a look, Te Reo Māori. Kia ora to all of you saying hello there. Thank you. So take a look. This is a fantastic mathematical thinking activity. And even though I'm sorry, but I can't read Te Reo Māori, but I know that it's asking me to get 8 litres of water into the 11-litre jug. It's very much trial and error. Remember I talked to you about let your digital do the rich problem solving? This is a really good example of that. Really rich task. And how amazing that you can get it in other languages. There's actually about 40 languages on Matific, including Te Reo Māori, which is amazing. Firstly, this takes away the cultural bias. So if you have a student or students in your class where the only issue they have is English, they can't read the question, that should not mean that they have a poor maths score on their report card. It shouldn't be about whether they can read the question. It should be about the maths. So if you can do that in their own language, that's First thing, that barrier's gone. And secondly, it's just so special. The kids get so excited when they see it in their own language. So actually with Matific, you can kill two birds. You can teach maths and language at the same time. So anyway, I just thought I'd share that with you. All right, we're almost running out of time. It's going very quickly, but we talked about getting ready for school. This is another little thing you're going to love. So if you've got Matific, or if you haven't got Matific, you can do a trial, but this is a nice thing that's going to happen at the start of the year. There's an amazing student interface. And the first thing they will do when they get on Matific for the first time, or even if they had it last year, now that they've moved into a new class, they'll be required to do this placement test. Now, all it is a series of fun questions. The students won't be bothered by it, and it will just flow through a series of questions. Doesn't take too long, no more than about 20 minutes or so. And at the end of it, it's like the differentiation gets done for you, because then from then on, this is the pathway. That's their individual learning pathway for each student. So the students will get assigned appropriate content from that time on, and it continually adjusts. So if they're succeeding, it will get harder, or it will keep it easier if they're struggling, and so on. And you get to see the results as well. So you'll get a report that shows what questions on that placement test they got right and wrong. And I've circled it there a bit roughly. There's an export button. So all of those results you can download onto a spreadsheet. So we talked about the importance of getting to know your students. So that placement test is actually really helpful. Now, any comments, remember, if you've got questions, now is the time, put that in the chat box. But I did want to show you a couple of exciting things. Get your phones ready. If your school has not tried Matific before, well, it's time you did. So we've got a special offer for you, so you can have it free till the end of March. So look, obviously during COVID and the last year or two, we've been swamped. So I'm sorry, if you already accessed our free offer last year, we can't keep doing that to you again. So I'm sorry. It's for schools who didn't have complimentary access last year, and we want to get whole school participation happening. So scan that QR code, and we'll register your school and get you started. So you can have free access to the end of March. And it's a great time of year to be doing it, because as I said, you've got that placement test, which is a nice way to start the year. Now, I'm going to sound like an infomercial now. Are you ready? But wait, there's more. There's something else I wanted to share with you, because we run lots of webinars throughout the year, throughout the course of the year. We're very excited about the next one. Have you all finished scanning? If you want to scan that and get free access to Matific till the end of March, you should have scanned. All right, but I want to show you our next webinar, because we're pretty excited about this one. We like to also do webinars that are not just about mathematics, because we are interested in education in its entirety. So if you're in New Zealand, you might not know who this person is. If you're in Australia, you might. So Heath Shaw, famous AFL player, recently retired, but he's in the media all the time, and he's now an ADHD ambassador. For an ambassador with ADHD Australia, because he himself was diagnosed with ADHD when he was in school. So we have Heath joining us to talk about his experience. We also will have on the panel an expert from ADHD Australia, because I'm sure you have all taught at some time, and you might this year have a student or students with ADHD, or you might suspect they have ADHD, and it's often very difficult to identify. It's difficult to know how to help them. So the panel the people from ADHD Australia and Heath, we're going to look at and address all of that in our next webinar. So once again, you can scan that QR code if you want to register for that webinar. Now is your chance. If you have any questions at all about what you've seen today, I'd love for you to pop that in the chat box. Ask me any questions you like, because our time is just about up. So I want to say thank you, because this is your precious holiday time and it's nearly over. So I really want to thank you for joining us today for this webinar. There'll be a very quick survey at the end when you log off. I'd really appreciate if you could do that, because that helps us with our future planning for webinars down the track. Good luck. I hope 2022 brings lots of positivity. Things can only get better, can't they? So really good luck with your class, and good luck going back to school. And if you need any questions, or you have any questions, or you want any advice about Matific, please get in touch and take a look at the site. Thank you so much for joining us today. Have a lovely evening, and I'll see you again next time. Bye for now.